My sincerest condolences go out to the gentleman and father who was killed in this incident, his colleagues who were tragically injured. I think it's important that we all learn from this tragedy. Hello everyone, this is Christopher, your South Florida yacht expert. Normally we get to talk about lots of fun stuff on this channel regarding boats and yachts, but today we're talking about a tragedy in the boating world, and we want to at least try to understand what happened, learn how all of us can be safer when operating on the water to prevent this type of tragedy from happening ever again. So here's what I believe we know. And to be clear, the Florida State Fire Marshal is conducting a formal investigation, and they will, of course, determine all of the objective 100% facts, and that'll take some time. However, the marine community here in South Florida is a small, tightly knit community, and I think I have a pretty good understanding of the facts and what occurred in this horrible and tragic situation. So here's what I believe occurred. So company, local marine dealership here, was preparing an Axopar 45 boat to be displayed at the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show. And Axopar boats are made from fiberglass. They are built in Poland, and they are shipped to the United States without engines. So prepping a boat like that is a very involved process, because it's not just starting batteries. You are installing, rigging engines, electronic controls, and it's quite a process. And boat show preparation, I know from experience, can be very chaotic, very intense, and a lot happening in a short period of time to get all the display boats ready for the boat show. An Axopar 45, engines had been rigged, triple mercury outboard engines. The boat was on a trailer at a boatyard facility, and it was being fueled from a tanker truck. So tanker truck parked nearby, and it was being fueled with gasoline to be transported or be ready to be driven to the boat show via water. At the same time, as I understand, the boat was covered with that shrink wrap material that new boats are often protected with for transport and so on, to keep them nice and clean. What I understand is that during the fueling process, the technicians who were preparing the boat were also installing some batteries or doing some other type of electrical work simultaneously. This is certainly not the fault the person who was tragically killed in this incident, nor the other technicians who were critically injured. But we do need to all learn from this tragedy so that we can prevent it from happening again. So let's review some of the basics, and this applies to gasoline fueling. Diesel is a separate subject. We're not going to cover that today. But this was also a little unique because the boat was on a trailer, and it was likely covered, and likely there was other work being performed on the boat at the same time as the fueling process. So if we look at a couple of things, so gasoline is obviously an incredibly flammable liquid. It's also an incredibly, even more so, flammable vapor. And that's why when we are fueling any sort of vehicle, it's very important that we have adequate ventilation, because as gasoline evaporates, and it evaporates very easily, those fumes are incredibly combustible. The slightest spark can cause an explosion if there are fumes in the air not being properly ventilated. That's why boats have a blower fan in the engine compartment to assist with ventilation before startup of the engine and make sure everything is ventilated properly. So if we have a boat on a trailer, number one, we don't have a ground because there are boats on a trailer with rubber tires. Number two, if it had that shrink wrap style cover on it, we are obstructing proper ventilation. So boats have all kinds of ventilation vents and ducts. And if it's shrink wrapped, obviously those are covered and they can't provide ventilation. In addition, you're creating a space inside that shrink wrap area that is contained and not ventilated at all. So any gasoline vapors that are accumulating, and there's always some, are going to stay contained within that wrapped area. The slightest, even a static electric charge, can ignite those gasoline vapors incredibly easy. If these technicians were installing starting batteries or doing other things regarding the electrical system, as you know, it's incredibly easy to create a spark in that situation. So, as often happens in these tragic situations, you have a series of small errors that combine, a series of small variables that combine simultaneously to create a tragic and deadly situation. The other, of course, the technicians were working extremely hard. Boat show preparation is chaotic. You're under a lot of pressure. When you're under pressure and when you're rushing is when you make mistakes. And think about the recreational boat world. I can certainly envision a scenario where we have family coming for the 4th of July. There's no gas in the boat. We're going to take everybody out boating all day. I need to run down to the fuel dock before company gets here in an hour, and I'm going to be rushed. And I'm going to think less clearly. And I'm talking on my phone, and I'm taking phone calls and texting while I'm fueling the boat at the fuel dock. And that's when you make mistakes. And we are all human, and we are all prone to make mistakes, which is why you need to slow down, turn off your phone, and stay focused on the fueling process. And a boat in the water is grounded, and modern boats have grounding systems to help eliminate any sort of electrical spark or other problem. But if we think about this boat on a trailer with rubber tires, it's isolated from the ground, and it was being fueled by an adjacent fuel truck. Now, I'm sure fuel truck companies have proper grounding setups and so on, just like airplane fueling companies. And it's unclear what was used in this case. Again, the fire marshal will be doing an official investigation. But we have technicians who were under a lot of pressure. They were trying to do a lot of things at the same time. The boat was potentially wrecked, and tragedy ensued. And a few other variables here are that fiberglass burns, and it burns pretty easily. It burns like firewood once it catches on fire. In addition, I believe this boat had lithium batteries. So many modern boats have traditional lead acid starter batteries to start the engines, but they have significantly sized lithium ion or other lithium chemistry batteries for backup power, refrigeration, air conditioning, all kinds of cool things. And they're a really nice feature to have on a boat. However, once lithium batteries catch fire, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to extinguish them. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, they're self-oxidizing. So even if you deprive the battery of oxygen, which would normally extinguish a fire, they're creating their own oxygen. So the fire doesn't care, it keeps going. And it burns at such a hot temperature, it's very difficult to cool it down. And if you look at the video of this incident, you'll see that the firefighters, for hours after the explosion and everyone had been evacuated, continued to spray large quantities of water on continuously burning lithium-ion battery packs. And firefighters obviously are trained in these situations. They know it's unlikely they're going to extinguish the fire, but at least by keeping water on it, you're keeping the temperature down and hopefully avoiding the fire spreading to other areas. You can pour thousands of gallons of water continuously on a lithium battery fire, and it will just continue to burn. And that also happened in this case. But that was subsequent to the tragic and massive explosion that occurred from the gasoline vapors. Modern boats and modern vehicles have grounding systems and all kinds of preventive safety measures to prevent gasoline explosions. And it's very difficult for a modern vehicle to explode while fueling. They can catch fire if a lot of bad things happen, but it's very unusual for them to explode. I think it's very unusual for boats to explode also. Again, worst case scenario typically is catching fire, but this didn't catch fire, this exploded. And that leads me to believe that this boat was wrapped, it was contained, a large amount of gasoline vapors accumulated in that enclosed space, and there was a small ignition source either from installing batteries or other electronics, or even those shrink wraps. That material can generate static electricity. So just like when you rub your feet on the carpet and you touch someone and it generates a spark, that shrink wrap material is very staticky and very prone to creating a spark. So we had a tragedy of errors all combined to result in the tragic loss of a father and in the critical injury of several other marine technicians. So to review, when you are fueling a gasoline boat, number one, ventilation is paramount. Number two, nobody's on board. If you have to be on board to fuel, it's just the captain. Number three, get off your phone. Number four, stay focused. Number five, don't rush. Take your time. And if any fuel spills, if there's any fuel anywhere, we want to clean it up properly. And we want to, of course, make sure there is no opportunity for any spark. It's probably a good practice to turn off your battery switches when you're fueling as well. And again, I don't pretend that I do this perfectly every time I pull up to a fuel dock, believe me. But this needs to be a reminder to all of us to be extremely cautious anytime we are putting gasoline into our boat or yacht. So ventilation, nobody on board, ideally turn off battery switches, fuel the boat, pay complete attention, clean up any overfill. If you smell any gasoline vapors, we don't do anything until that issue is resolved and we avoid any potential spark source. And you'd be shocked at the bizarre ways a small spark can be created. And gasoline vapors are insanely combustible. So they dissipate very quickly in proper ventilation situations, but you have to have proper ventilation situations and just be extra careful out there. But I think it's important that we all learn from this tragedy. We're in a rush. It's 4th of July. Company's coming. We run to the fuel dock. We're taking phone calls. We're talking to everybody. That's when problems occur, or worse yet, tragedies occur. So if I can provide any assistance for you in learning how to safely operate your boat, fuel your boat, handle your boat, or anything else that has to do with marine safety and operation, it'd be my pleasure to do so. I'm Christopher, your South Florida yacht expert. And unfortunately, this is a tragedy, and it would even be more tragic if we did not learn from this tragedy and all work together to prevent it from ever happening again.